Rachel passed the bar exam at 10:47 a.m. At 11:03, she texted me a photo of her results with a single line. "It's official. I'm free." She meant free in more ways than one. By the time she walked through the front door at 7:42 p.m., she was already drunk on champagne and something colder, freedom, maybe, or just a sense of escape. She came in laughing, heels in one hand, a bottle of Mode in the other. Her breath hit me before her words did. "You're still up?" she said, dropping her purse like I was housekeeping. "Big day? We should celebrate." Then she handed me an envelope. Thick cardstock. Embossed seal. No effort to hide what it was. "Divorce papers. You've served your purpose, Daniel," she said, flat as a memo. "I need to focus on my future now." I didn't say a word. Not because I didn't have them. God knows I had 8 years' worth. But because I realized she'd already made this decision long before tonight. Before the champagne. Probably sometime between her civil procedure midterm and that first networking event she told me was just alumni and shrimp cocktails. So I just looked at her. Looked past the makeup she never wore for me. The $1,000 purse I paid for. The eyes that used to say thank you, but tonight just blinked with polite indifference. I took the pen from the drawer. Signed every page. And then I handed her the house keys, the garage fob, and the folder with her mother's remaining medical records. All organized, labeled, and color-coded, like always. She didn't even look surprised. No, what really stung was the relief on her face. Like she was worried I might cry, or beg, or embarrass her. But I didn't. I put on my coat, stepped into the cold November night, and left. No bags. No plan. Just the weight of 8 years crashing off my shoulders like a poorly fastened parachute. You spend almost a decade tending to someone's dying mother, wiping her face, pushing her wheelchair, warming her goddamn soup. And when the final credits roll, you're not even mentioned in the end crawl. That's how it felt. Like I'd been edited out of my own life story. Before I walked away, I turned back one last time. She was already on the phone, laughing with someone. Champagne cork rolling across the floor like the punchline to a joke I wasn't invited to. I used to think betrayal came in the form of shouting matches, thrown glasses, motel receipts. Turns out, sometimes it just wears a blazer, hands you a pre-printed envelope, and says, "Thanks for the ride. By the way, if you've made it this far, do me a favor. Subscribe." Yeah, more than 90% of folks just listen and vanish. But this story, it's the only way my team and I get the fuel to keep digging into these truths. So hit that button. It'll cost you nothing. Unlike what I paid. Anyway, people say, you should have seen it coming. Sure. But tell me how exactly? When you're busy working 2 jobs, scheduling chemo sessions, folding her mother's laundry, paying tuition, and skipping meals so she can make it to her mock trial, when exactly are you supposed to detect betrayal? What psychic alarm are you supposed to hear while your wife is studying contracts and you're cleaning up after her mother's last coughing fit? I'll admit it, I stayed longer than I should have. Not because I was weak, because I believed in her, believed in us. But belief is a funny thing. It keeps you warm right until it gets weaponized. I left everything that night. The house, the car, my name on the mailbox. She could keep it all. I didn't need reminders. I didn't need vengeance. Not then, anyway, because what she didn't know, what she still doesn't know as she laughs about me with her colleagues, is that when I left, I took the only thing that mattered. Silence. And silence, when used right, is a blade. The next Saturday, the house was packed with new faces, young attorneys, bar passers, and half-drunk HR managers with clipboards and wandering hands. Rachel had done well for herself. She rented out a rooftop space downtown, threw on a white pantsuit 2 sizes too tight, and played hostess like she'd been born into royalty instead of clawing her way there on my back. The party was a sea of synthetic grins and hollow laughter. No one asked where I was at first. Maybe they thought I'd be hovering around with a camera or flipping burgers in an apron-marked, supportive husband. But after the 3rd or 4th cocktail, people got bolder. "Hey, Ratch, where's your—" What was his name again? Daniel. She said it like she was trying to remember a hotel she once stayed in. Then she clinked her glass with a fork and raised it high. "Daniel," she said again, louder now, with that PR smile she'd been practicing in front of the mirror since law school orientation. "Let's toast to the man who made all this possible." A few people clapped. Polite. Confused. She didn't stop. He was exactly what I needed at the time. A rock. A wallet. A stepping stone. The laughter that followed wasn't polite anymore. It had teeth. Someone from the DA's office spit out their drink. A paralegal snorted and slapped the table. Rachel just sipped her champagne and basked in the applause like she'd delivered a killer closing argument. One of her colleagues from mergers leaned in and whispered something in her ear that made her laugh so hard she doubled over. But not everyone was laughing. Unbeknownst to her, one of the new hires, kid named Miles, had just transferred from a firm upstate where I'd done some quiet consulting after leaving. He didn't say a word, just pulled out his phone, hit record halfway through her toast, and kept his expression neutral. You know how rumors usually start in bathrooms or break rooms? This one started in 4K, with perfect audio. By Monday, the clip was quietly circulating on a few Slack channels, then group chats. Then one of the partner's assistants forwarded it to someone in HR with a note. This looks bad? Rachel never noticed. She was too busy basking in her fresh start, revamping her LinkedIn to associate attorney, commercial litigation, deleting every photo of me from her feed, and uploading a new bio that read, "Built my life from scratch. No handouts. Just hustle. No handouts. That's rich, considering I once pawned my father's watch to cover her last semester's textbooks. But sure, just hustle." She even posted a selfie from the party with the caption, "It takes a village. But sometimes, it just takes a stepping stone." What she didn't know, what she still doesn't, is that someone in that room had known me. Not well, not recently, but well enough. They'd seen the chair I used to sleep in next to her mother's bed, had dinner in our tiny apartment once, watched me carry Rachel's books to her car because she didn't want to scuff her heels before mock court. And now they were watching her stand on my bones like they were marble steps. The slander didn't sting. Not really. By then, I was past pain. What interested me wasn't her betrayal anymore. It was her confidence. Because when someone thinks the past can't reach them, that's when they're most exposed. When they laugh too loud, toast too publicly, speak without thinking. That's when the gods of consequence perk up their ears. And someone, somewhere, always hits record. I didn't rent a motel. I didn't crash on anyone's couch. I walked into a train station, picked the fourth destination from the departure board, and got on. I don't even remember where it went. Just that it was far enough for silence to settle. I burned the SIM card first, then the email, then the name. Daniel S. Harper didn't disappear. He molted. I had just enough in savings to last 2 months, assuming I didn't eat. So I made a call. Not to a friend. Not to family. I didn't have those anymore. I called a client I'd once helped pro bono, a struggling software startup founder with more ideas than cash and a desperate need for guidance on contracts, licensing, and equity splits. I told him I didn't want money. "I want a seat," I said. "Quiet, in the back. Let me help you not get screwed." He agreed. I rewrote his IP clauses, cleaned up his books, and flagged a silent investor's clause that would have turned him into a contractor in 6 months. In return, he gave me 4% equity and introduced me to 2 other founders just as desperate. That was year 1. Rachel, meanwhile, made partner track. Boutique litigation firm. Fast track due to raw intelligence and discipline, according to her profile in City Law Weekly. The photo they used showed her holding a plaque and looking off camera, like justice was whispering stock tips in her ear. Her bio said she rose from adversity and had no safety net. Interesting phrasing, considering I was that net. I didn't stalk her, didn't cyberstalk either. I made a rule, no looking back. But every now and then, her face popped up in an article, a panel, a speaking engagement. She was climbing. I was still digging. By year 2, I was sitting in on board calls, advising on stealth M&As under a different name, D.S. Harwood. I liked the ring. It sounded unassuming, mild, the kind of name that gets typed and forgotten. But it got results. The companies I worked with started avoiding litigation, carving better deals, preempting trouble. One of them got acquired for 8 figures. The founder tried to wire me a bonus. I told him to reinvest it into a new holding structure I'd help him build. Quietly, I was becoming the guy CEOs called when they didn't want their in-house counsel to know how scared they were. I never once raised my voice. Never once filed a complaint. Never once mentioned her name. Because this wasn't revenge. Revenge implies emotion. This was engineering. You don't build rockets because you're angry at the ground. One day I got a call from a finance guy I didn't know. Said he was handling restructuring for a trust with significant exposure and needed someone to help navigate litigation strategy. Off record, flexible. Someone with a spine and a shadow. I asked where he got my name. He just said, "A guy who said you saved his company's soul." Funny. That could have been any of the 3. That project led to another, then another. I never went on payroll. I never signed anything with my real name. But behind closed doors, people began referring to me as the guy who made problems go away. The kind of guy who didn't ask for credit, just position. By the start of year 3, I had equity in 6 companies, 2 NDA-bound retainers, and an office no one knew I used. Rachel, on the other hand, had headshots, hashtags, and press quotes. Just hustle, she liked to say. But hustle is loud. What I was building couldn't be shouted. It had to be whispered. Because someday, without meaning to, she was going to walk into a room and find out just how far a whisper can travel. The deal was supposed to be easy. Rachel even said so in the kickoff meeting, right before sipping an $18 oat milk latte and telling her assistant to clear Thursday for celebratory cocktails. It was a textbook acquisition. Mid-Tech Systems, a rapidly expanding SaaS firm, was buying out Dunwell and Company, a legacy parts supplier with aging leadership and no succession plan. The Dunwells, 2 elderly brothers and a niece who handled PR like she was still using a fax machine, had been circling retirement for years. Rachel's job was to shepherd the transaction through the legal weeds. Clean, quick, elegant. Instead, it started to rot. The first delay seemed harmless. One of the Dunwell brothers missed a deadline to submit valuation documents. Then their tax filings arrived incomplete, followed by a notice of counterfiling. Rachel chalked it up to stubborn old men digging in their heels. But then came the letter. A 2-page procedural objection. Dry, precise, and oddly preemptive. It flagged a potential violation in the early due diligence clause. Not something major, but phrased just cleverly enough to raise red flags with Mid-Tech's board. The language was surgical. Too surgical. Rachel read it 3 times and passed it to her associate, who frowned and said, "This is actually really sharp. Like surgical sharp." She waved him off. "We'll respond by end of day." They're bluffing. But they weren't. 3 days later, a second letter arrived, this time requesting an extension due to unsettled questions of valuation methodology, including internal bias toward goodwill weighting. Translation: they were accusing Rachel's team of front-loading the deal to benefit the buyer. Mid-Tech's GC called her personally. "Why does it feel like we're walking into a buzzsaw?" he asked. This was supposed to be a handshake deal. Now we're getting outmaneuvered. Rachel, for the first time in months, didn't have an immediate answer. She doubled back through every brief her team had drafted, every email logged, every timestamp note. Everything looked clean, crisp, strategic. And yet, someone was staying 3 moves ahead. She scheduled a late-night strategy session with her team, ordered in Thai food, wrote timelines on the glass walls. At one point, she stood silently in front of a whiteboard covered in arrows, dates, and client names. Then she said it aloud. "Who the hell is on the other side?" Nobody had an answer. Her paralegals searched filings, looking for the outside firm listed. It was a newer one. Small, discreet. No LinkedIn presence. No flashy bios. Just initials on letterhead and a single contact. D.S. Harwood, General Counsel, External. She didn't flinch at the name. Not yet. But she circled it. Underlined it. "Harwood," she said aloud. "Never heard of him." That's the thing about building in silence. By the time they notice your name, you're already miles ahead, and they're looking up at a wall they never saw being built. The Dunwells, it turned out, had retained D.S. Harwood a year prior, quietly, through an LLC they formed just to hold their IP rights. Meaning Rachel's entire attack strategy had been aimed at the wrong legal entity. She didn't find that out until the next objection landed on her desk, citing improper party designation and requesting a full case reassignment, due to what it politely called procedural misalignment. That was when her junior partner looked at her and said, "They're not just resisting. They're turning the screws." Rachel's pride kicked in, of course. She buried herself in counter motions, spent weekends redrafting contracts, started barking at staff and showing up to the office in sweats and rage. But even then, something itched at her. Every time she adjusted, the other side adjusted faster. Every clause she thought airtight came back leaking. Every assumption got dissected before she could defend it. And the worst part? No leaks. No clues. No courtroom theatrics. Just calm, quiet pressure. The merger never closed. The deal didn't explode. It suffocated. And Rachel, used to being the lion in the room, was now chasing shadows. The game had changed, but she still hadn't figured out who taught the rules. Rachel was the last one in the office that night. The only sound was the low hum of the AC vents and the occasional clink of her glass as she swirled the ice. The Thai food she ordered earlier had gone cold and congealed in the paper carton. Her desk was a mess, sticky notes like landmines, half-shredded drafts, highlighters bleeding yellow onto contracts. She had been trying to piece together the Dunwell disaster for 6 straight hours, and it was still unraveling faster than she could sew it up. She reached for the latest courier drop from the opposing counsel, sealed and red-stamped, marked urgent in that infuriatingly smug serif font. The stamp wasn't necessary. She already knew what it would be, another delay, another trap. She opened it with one hand and kept scanning her screen, barely glancing down. Then her eyes flicked to the closing paragraph. Filed respectfully by counsel for the plaintiff, Daniel S. Harper, General Counsel, Harwood Holdings. She froze. No way. She leaned closer, thinking maybe she misread it. Some intern. Some cousin. A coincidence. But there it was again. Crisp, bold, professionally signed. Daniel S. Harper. She didn't breathe for a few seconds. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the page until the paper warped. She read it again. And again. Then she leaned back in her chair, very slowly, and stared at the ceiling like the answer was hiding in the air vents. Daniel. Her Daniel. The man she'd once told, "You're just not part of the future I see." The man she dumped like expired yogurt. The man she toasted about like a glorified chauffeur who'd outlived his use. She hadn't seen his name in years. He had vanished so completely, it was like he'd been scrubbed from the planet. She assumed he was probably managing a hardware store somewhere, or maybe living out of a trailer in Oregon. But this? General Counsel of Harwood Holdings. The very entity she failed to trace during due diligence because they'd masked their interests behind shell acquisitions and paperwork so tight, even her senior partner hadn't cracked it. She looked at the page again. No middle initial mistake. No typo. No alias. It was him. The silence in the room got heavier. Like the walls were closing in to hear her reaction. She reached for her phone instinctively, but didn't call anyone. What would she even say? Hey, remember the man I abandoned the day I passed the bar? He just handed me my own spine in a legal envelope. She laughed, bitter and dry. Her mind darted through memories. Him cutting pills for her mother with surgical precision, staying up all night reviewing her case notes, carrying soup to her bedside after a 14-hour exam day, nodding through her insults like he deserved them. Always useful, always calm, and then gone. No word, no tantrum, no fight, just a signature and a door quietly closed. She remembered thinking it was weak, pathetic, that she'd broken him so thoroughly he didn't even put up a fight. But now, reading his name at the bottom of a letter that was derailing her entire case, she understood. He hadn't been broken. He had been busy. Busy becoming the kind of man who didn't need to raise his voice to ruin you. The room felt colder now. The victory she thought was hers, the new job, the speaking engagements, the LinkedIn endorsements, it all felt like scaffolding built on sand. Her hands were shaking, so she placed them flat on the desk. Then the phone buzzed. It was a message from her associate. New motion incoming. Harwood's team wants to compel discovery. Some internal emails flagged. She didn't reply. Couldn't. Instead, she turned off the light, sat in the dark, and whispered one word. Daniel. The email surfaced on a Tuesday. It didn't come from a whistleblower or a leak. It came clean, straight through the proper channels, stamped, formatted, and filed as Exhibit B to a motion that hit her inbox like a sledgehammer. Motion to compel discovery. Filed by counsel for the plaintiff, Daniel S. Harper. Rachel opened it expecting more of the same. Strategic delays, polite sabotage, corporate red tape. Instead, she found herself staring at a direct quote pulled from one of her own internal memos. They're sentimental. Drag them through procedural mud. They'll fold before Q4. Use the niece. She's emotional and risk-averse. Below it, the accompanying note from Daniel's team read, "We request the court review the above email for evidence of prejudicial negotiation tactics and bad faith conduct, relevant under Rule 26. Rachel's stomach dropped before she even made it halfway through. She didn't remember writing that email exactly, but the language was hers. The snide tone, the cold calculus. She'd written it after their second strategy meeting, sent it as a late-night note to her team, trying to sound tough and clever, back when she thought the Dunwells were just another fading family brand ready to be swallowed. She never expected it to see the light of day, certainly not weaponized by her ex-husband in open court. By 9 a.m., she was in a meeting with 2 senior partners and her firm's general counsel. The room was tense, sterile, suffocating. Rachel, one of the partners, said, folding his hands like he was praying, "How in God's name did this get into the record?" "It was internal," she muttered. "Confidential. No one was supposed to see. It's discoverable if it goes through channels," the GC snapped. Which, evidently, it did. The senior partner leaned back, rubbing his temples. "You handed them motive. You gave them a narrative. He quoted me out of context." "No. He quoted you perfectly. The word perfectly hit harder than it should have. She wanted to scream, wanted to flip the table or throw something. Anything to shatter the smug silence her ex had left behind in that motion. But all she could do was sit there and stew in it. Her colleagues didn't say it, but their eyes did. This could cost us the case. This could cost you everything. And the worst part? Daniel never even addressed her directly in the filing. No underlining. No sarcasm. No gotcha moment. Just quiet, factual disassembly. It was the legal equivalent of watching your own words turn into a knife and realizing your ex-husband was not only holding it, he was letting you twist it. The judge responded by issuing a formal order. The email is deemed relevant and admissible under the scope of discovery. Motion to compel is granted. Defense is instructed to produce all related correspondence and internal memos regarding negotiation tactics used against the plaintiff. By noon, Rachel's name was trending in a handful of private legal forums. Not publicly, not yet, but the scent of blood had been picked up by her peers. Associates whispered. Paralegals paused when she walked by. And Daniel? Still no word. No message. No call. Just motions. Filed precisely. Delivered quietly. Unfolding like the slow, methodical turning of a screw. That night, she stayed late in the office again, combing through every email she'd sent in the past 6 months. Every memo. Every Slack message. Her eyes burned. Her wrists ached. Her confidence, that steel-plated pride she wore like armor, had started to bend under the pressure. She thought about texting him. Asking what? For mercy? For clarification? But there's no defense against your own handwriting. The next morning, she found a note slid under her office door. No signature. No envelope. Just a post-it with 3 words in block letters. Words are evidence. It wasn't signed. It didn't need to be. Rachel called the motion a formality. A legal nuisance. She told her team it would be denied, but they had to at least go through the process of attempting to remove Daniel as opposing counsel due to prior personal entanglement. She even used those exact words in the filing. Prior personal entanglement. Not marriage. Not 8 years of caregiving. Just a vague phrase, sterile and distant, like he was some old boyfriend who once borrowed her charger. The judge reviewed the motion without a hearing. Issued a denial in less than 48 hours. No elaboration, just one line. No evidence of current or potential bias preventing impartial legal representation. Motion to disqualify denied. She read it twice, printed it, then shredded the paper for no reason other than to hear something tear. Then, as if on cue, her firm's admin assistant came knocking on her office door, face pale, envelope in hand. "It's a notice," he said, addressed to the managing partners. She took it, opened it, and for the second time in as many weeks, her name felt like a stone in her mouth. Professional Oversight Council, Appointments Update. Effective immediately, Daniel S. Harper had been appointed as a standing member of the POC, the regional legal body that conducted independent reviews of attorney misconduct and ethical violations across multiple counties. He was now one of 6 members with voting power. Jurisdiction over disciplinary hearings. Subpoena authority. Public reprimand authority. Her breath caught. She sat down fast. She didn't know he had even applied. Didn't know he qualified. The POC wasn't some advisory board you got onto by charm or donation. It was built for the cold-blooded, the hyper-competent, the ones with spotless records and knives for logic. The ones who didn't flinch. Daniel had flinched plenty during their marriage. At least that's what she remembered. Now she wasn't so sure. "Do we need to report this?" One of the junior partners asked later that day. "I mean, if things keep going badly, it could look." "It's a coincidence," Rachel snapped. "And we are not going to give the impression that we're afraid of oversight." But she was. And not just oversight. Him. Because the moment that letter hit her hands, she understood what was happening. This wasn't about winning the case. It wasn't even about the merger anymore. Daniel had positioned himself perfectly, not to punish her, but to watch her fall without laying a finger. If the case imploded under her watch, if the Dunwells filed a grievance, if Midtech pulled out and accused her of intentional procedural misconduct, all of it could end up in front of the POC. And he'd be there, sitting on the review board. No need to recuse himself unless it was a formal complaint from her directly. She imagined it. Entering a room full of attorneys with notebooks and quiet expressions, looking up to see him, calm, collected, possibly even chairing the session. Her ex-husband. Her stepping stone. Now with the authority to decide whether she still deserved to call herself an attorney. The weight of it all began to collapse inward. Her breathing got shallow. Her hands wouldn't stop trembling. She had underestimated him. so thoroughly, so completely, that she didn't just leave the door open when she walked away. She left the blueprints for her destruction lying right on the table. And he hadn't burned them. He'd filed them, categorized them, used them to build a foundation stronger than anything she'd ever known. That night, she stayed long past midnight, sitting in her glass office, staring at the skyline she used to think she owned. Now it felt borrowed, like everything else. The email she sent to HR at 2:03 a.m. was short. No greeting, no signature, just one request. Effective immediately, I am requesting to recuse myself from the Dunwell matter due to a previously undisclosed personal conflict with opposing counsel. The next morning, she CC'd the partners, the general counsel, and even her executive assistant to make it look transparent. Proactive, like a responsible attorney catching an oversight. It was too late. By noon, Daniel's team had filed a formal objection to her recusal. The objection wasn't emotional. No grandstanding. Just another meticulously structured document, delivered like all the others, sharp, cold, surgical. In it, Daniel's lead associate laid out a chronological timeline of the case, highlighting Rachel's direct involvement in at least 11 separate strategic decisions made after her office received documents bearing Daniel's signature. More damning than that was the attached appendix, a series of internal emails she'd sent, dated after she'd seen his name, where she continued managing the case, offering directives, coordinating briefings, and even mocking the Dunwell side. The final nail came in the form of a screenshot from the firm's internal calendar system. Rachel had marked the day she received Daniel's name with a private tag labeled H. The objection concluded with one final line. Defense counsel cannot, in good faith, claim ignorance. The issue is not the prior relationship. The issue is the conscious choice to proceed without disclosure, an ethical violation that places both the case and the court's confidence in jeopardy. By 4 p.m., she was summoned into a closed-door meeting with the firm's managing committee. They were polite, corporate, dead-eyed. One of the senior partners, the same man who once told her she had the cold focus of a sniper, didn't even look up from the table. He just asked, flatly, "Did you ever disclose the relationship, Rachel?" She hesitated. "Not formally," she admitted. "But it wasn't malicious. I didn't think it would affect." "That's not your call to make." Another partner cut in. The general counsel flipped through the binder in front of him. "You had every opportunity. The moment his name appeared in the filings, you should have flagged it. Not 6 weeks into negotiations. Not after the motion to compel. It wasn't strategic," she tried. "It was panic. I was trying to protect the firm." That hung in the air. Protect the firm. The irony was so thick it was almost funny, because now, it was the firm trying to protect itself from her. "Rachel," said the GC quietly, "do you understand how this looks?" She didn't answer, because she did understand. It looked like she'd hidden a personal conflict to maintain control of a high-profile case, only to panic and try to retroactively cover her tracks when it went sideways. It looked like her silence wasn't just a lapse in judgment, but a deliberate omission. It looked like negligence, at best, and at worst, it looked like ethics violations that could land them in front of a disciplinary board. And everyone in that room knew exactly who'd be sitting on that board if it came to that. They didn't say Daniel's name. They didn't have to. By the time she got back to her office, her access to the Dunwell case file had already been revoked. Her email was flooded with requests for documentation, meeting minutes, clarification timelines. The firm's internal review had officially begun. Her assistant wouldn't meet her eyes. One of the junior associates, someone who'd once idolized her, walked by and said nothing, just turned his head toward the wall like he couldn't risk being seen in the blast radius. That afternoon, she locked her office door and sat alone with her phone in her hand, staring at the contact she never deleted. Daniel H. No photo, no recent calls, just a string of zeros. Her thumb hovered over the screen. She wanted to scream, beg, apologize, threaten, something. But what could she say? That she didn't mean it? That he was right? That she was sorry, for the toast, for the arrogance, for not knowing who the hell she was dealing with? The words wouldn't come, because she wasn't just losing the case. She was losing her image, her career, her grip, and all of it, every unraveling thread, had started the moment she failed to treat him like more than a stepping stone. Now the cracks weren't just internal. They were public. The hearing room was smaller than she expected. No grand court. No oak-paneled theater for drama. Just a carpeted conference space with bad lighting, lukewarm water pitchers, and a crescent of silent judgment behind nameplates. Rachel sat at the defense table, hands neatly folded, trying to fake calm. Her blazer was tailored, her hair perfect, but her stomach was a war zone. Her firm hadn't pulled her. Whether it was strategy, punishment, or optics, no one said. They just said she was still led. And now, as opposing counsel prepared to deliver their final presentation, all she could hear was the soft rustling of papers and the buzz of a flickering fluorescent light above her. Daniel didn't speak right away. He stood, buttoned his suit jacket, walked to the center of the room with that maddening patience he used to have when folding her mother's laundry by hand. Then he looked directly at the arbitration panel, cleared his throat, and began. In Exhibit F, you'll find a transcription from a recording submitted by a third party, an audio excerpt taken from a social gathering, approximately 3 days after the defense counsel's graduation and bar certification. Rachel's pulse pounded in her ears. She knew what was coming. Still, she hoped, prayed, he wouldn't. Daniel kept his voice even. In that excerpt, the following words are attributed to Ms. Rachel M. Langston. He was just a stepping stone. I needed stability while I built something better. Silence. The kind that curdles the air. Daniel didn't turn his head, didn't glance at her, didn't allow even a sliver of personal expression to break the surface. It was pure professional neutrality, clinical, surgical. But the room reacted. One of the panelists raised an eyebrow. Another tilted their head, visibly uncomfortable. Even the stenographer paused her typing for half a second. Rachel sat frozen, her mouth dry, her lungs tight, her vision tunneling just enough to blur the edges of the room. She felt every eye shift toward her, subtle, like dust settling, but unmistakable. He was just a stepping stone. She'd said it while drunk, triumphant, surrounded by peers who laughed at cruelty like it was wit. She thought the moment had disappeared into the night like spilled champagne. But someone had recorded it. Someone had sent it. And Daniel had waited. Not to humiliate her in public. No, that would have been easy. He waited until her words were relevant, admissible, consequential. Now they weren't just cruel, they were strategic. They painted a portrait of a lawyer who acted out of arrogance, not ethics, who saw people as tools, who viewed professional conduct as theater, not duty. Rachel opened her mouth, just slightly, as if to object, to explain, to breathe, but nothing came out. Daniel didn't need to elaborate. He let the quote hang in the room like smoke from a fire everyone could now see was hers. When he finished, he returned to his seat without a glance in her direction. She could feel her chair sinking under her. Across the room, her firm's GC avoided her gaze. One partner thumbed through a legal pad he wasn't even writing on. The associate who once idolized her sat stone-faced in the back. No one moved to help. No one interrupted. And still, Daniel didn't smirk, didn't gloat, just took a sip of water, opened his briefcase, and began organizing the next exhibit like this was any other day. Rachel felt it then, not just the sting of exposure, but the isolation. A hollowness carved out by the slow realization that her fall wasn't a result of one error or one enemy. It was every little choice she thought wouldn't matter. Every corner cut, every cruel remark, every assumption that the people you stand on will never stand again. And now she was the one seated, watched, judged, and quotable. The rest of the hearing blurred. Motions, statements, closing remarks. But no one remembered anything except that line. The line that followed her out the door, down the hall, and into the elevator like a shadow sewn to her name. By the time she made it back to her office, the HR director was waiting inside with a neutral expression and a sealed envelope. No words, just policies and protocol. The case didn't implode, it evaporated. Midtech quietly pulled the plug a week after the hearing. Their GC issued a bland statement about recalibrating priorities, but everyone knew it was a mercy kill. Too much bad press, too much risk, no appetite for a deal now radioactive with scandal. Internally, Rachel's firm conducted a strategic personnel reallocation. That's what the email said. She wasn't fired. That would have drawn headlines. She was just detached. Her name quietly removed from the website. Her office packed by someone else. Her email deactivated without ceremony. Her severance sealed behind an NDA so tight, even the whispers couldn't breathe. One partner gave her a weak handshake in the lobby. Another offered a shoulder pat so light it felt like static. No one said goodbye. No one mentioned the hearing. No one used the word stepping stone. They didn't need to. She moved into a sublet, half the size of her old place, with air vents that clanked like they were coughing up judgment. She applied to 5 firms. Got one reply, a polite rejection. She started rewriting her resume with new verbs, softer titles. Strategic consultant, private legal advisor, Anything to scrub the stench of exposure. Then one afternoon, weeks after the silence had begun to feel normal, someone knocked on her door. Not the building manager. Not food delivery. A woman in a blazer, sunglasses still on. No badge. No clipboard. Just a brown envelope in hand. "For Ms. Langston," she said, and left before Rachel could ask a single question. No sender listed. No postage. Just her name, handwritten in black ink. She opened it at the kitchen counter, breath held, stomach tight. Inside was a single document, familiar, yellowed slightly at the edges. Her original divorce filing. The one she served Daniel with on the night she passed the bar. Same envelope. Same pages. Same red stamp across the top. But now, there was something new. At the bottom, just under the final signature line, in handwriting she hadn't seen in years. Clean, deliberate, unmistakably his. "Stepping stones don't move backwards. Best of luck climbing alone." No signature. No return address. No phone number. Just that. Rachel stood there, hands trembling, not with rage, but with something quieter, heavier, like gravity had shifted slightly, pulling her spine down one vertebra at a time. She read it again, then once more. The irony wasn't lost on her. He didn't threaten, didn't raise his voice, never retaliated in ways you could record or punish. He simply reframed her story, rearranged it so every piece she thought she controlled turned against her. She once called him a stepping stone, believed it, but he wasn't under her feet anymore. He was above her, behind her, around her. The air itself had changed, and she was breathing in the echo of a man who never needed to scream to win. She folded the letter back into the envelope, placed it in the drawer beside unopened mail and cold takeout menus, then sat at the table, still, silent, and understood, finally, irrevocably. Some men don't chase revenge. They architect it.